Welcome back to the DSR channel, and I am covering the lore now from the Forgotten Realms book, Heroes of Faerun. And I am wearing my Dumbbells and Dragons shirt because we're going to be lore buffs now. All right, get it? And before I get into the specific factions lore, I wanted to cover a brief history of Forgotten Realms. And also, I noticed a timeline update that they snuck in on us. And this is week 9. We finished week 8 at 774 subscribers. And as of this recording, we're at 883. So we're making progress. I would love to finish week 9 at 900. Just the symmetry alone is awesome. And as I was preparing to dive into my video on the Cult of the Dragon faction, I was comparing both of the books, Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide and Forgotten Realms Heroes of Faerun, because both books have a great deal of lore. And they didn't reprint all the lore in this new book. So both books are still quite valuable in the perspective of having both of them for lore. I was comparing them, looking at things to see what they'd changed, and I noticed something here. Yes, eagle-eyed viewers, the very last entry there in this timeline from the new book shows that present day is now 1501 DR. That's Dale Reckoning time. And it says the current year is the year of the Shining Mythal. So, if you are familiar with the lore of the Forgotten Realms and all of the adventures set in it from 5th edition, yes, that was the previous entry, the second Sundering. So, all of the adventures for 5th edition Forgotten Realms since 2014 have been set in 1482 DR to 1489 DR. Okay, that was 2014. And now, apparently, and they didn't say anything about this, I don't remember any announcements. 5th edition 2024 version now is now moved ahead to 1501 DR. They thought we wouldn't notice, but we did. So instead of mentioning it at the beginning of every one of the faction videos, I thought I would do a quick video on the history of the Forgotten Realms and this timeline update once, and then I'll get into each of the faction videos. So let's break it down. This timeline provides a summary of Faerun's history. Dates are provided in Dale Reckoning, DR. Beginning with the year about -700 DR, years have a name found in the Roll of Years. Prophetic warnings by the Netherese mage Agathra, and expanded by Alawando of Candlekeep. Days of Thunder, -35,000 DR to -30,000 DR. Water recedes to reveal the supercontinent of Mera Ouroboros, eventually inhabited by the so-called creator races. During this time, empires of reptilian, amphibian, and avian peoples, known in Elvish as Iqatel Kesir, the creator races, dominated the world. They built great cities of stone and glass, carved paths through the wilderness, tamed the great lizards, worked mighty magics, shaped the world around them, and warred upon each other. Those were the days of thunder. The age of the creator races came to a sudden end some 30,000 years ago. Perhaps their wars reached a terrible and inevitable crescendo, or they tampered with forbidden forces. For whatever reason, the world changed and their vast empires vanished. All that remains of them are the ruins and the scattered lizard folk, Bullywug, and Aarakocra tribes, barbaric descendants of those who once ruled the world. The Dawn Age, -30,000 DR to -24,000 DR. The empires of the creator races fade, replaced by realms of dragons and giants. These two great peoples wage mighty wars for centuries. The First Flowering, -24,000 DR to -12,000 DR. From the ruins of the Days of Thunder and the Dawn Age arose the first nations of the Proud People, the elves and dwarves in the region. The elves raised up the nations of Erivandar, Ardeep, and Ilithir. They settled at Ilifarn along the Sword Coast from the spine of the world to the river Delambir, its capital, Elinthaldar, in the shadow of what is now Mount Waterdeep. Wood elves and moon elves founded the kingdom of Erlan in the Delambir Valley and the High Forest, and separatists from Erivandar settled Maertar in the lands of the present-day High Moor and Misty Forest. The dwarf clans united as the nation of Delzun, named for its forge founder, with dwarf holds built on sites ranging from the Ice Mountains to the Nether Mountains and the Narrow Sea, and settlements and halls westward to the Crags and the Sword Mountains. The proud people regularly defended their homelands against orc hordes that arose from the mountains of the spine of the world and surged southward to attack and pillage. Thousands of years after the rise of the great elven nations, hundreds of high elf mages united to cast a spell intended to create a glorious homeland for their race. The spell succeeded, but it rippled backward and forward in time, and the land was sundered, changing the face of the world. The largest continent of this new world is now called Faerun. Far from its western shores rose the Isle of Evermeet, considered a part of Arvindor, the home of the elven gods, on the plain of Arborea, and a bridge between worlds. This was known as the First Sundering. The Crown Wars, negative 12,000 DR to negative 9,000 DR. Some 13,000 years ago, war broke out between the elven nations of Arvendir and Meritar, beginning in a series of conflicts known as the Crown Wars. Lasting some 3,000 years, these conflicts culminated in a dark disaster, in which terrible storms engulfed Meritar, turning it into a wasteland with a single season, leaving behind the area now known as the High Moor. The High Mages of Erivandar are blamed for the destruction, although no proof was ever produced. The vengeful Dark Elves of Ilithir turned to corrupt and demonic powers, unleashing them against Erivandar. In the centuries of destruction that followed, elf priests and high mages fervently prayed to Corellon the Lorathian and the gods of the elven pantheon for salvation. Corellon interceded in the Crown Wars and cursed the Dark Elves so that they might never dwell comfortably under the sun. Now finding themselves pained by exposure to daylight, the Drow, in a mere 2 months' time, retreated from the sunlit lands of the world above into the Underdark. They abandoned all loyalty to the elven gods who betrayed them and banished them, turning instead to Lolth, the demon queen of spiders, as their patron. War soon began between the Drow and the underground cities of the dwarves. Founding time, negative 9,000 DR to negative 3,000 DR. As elven influence declines, other realms arise, including Imiskar, Netheril, Rashaman, and Unther. The genies Kalim and Memnon are bound. The rise and fall of Netheril. More than 5,000 years ago, a group of human fishing villages on the shores of the Narrow Sea joined under the rule of the shaman king Nether, becoming known as the Empire of Netheril. The Netherese learned the use of magic from the Erlani elves and became renowned wizards. Centuries later, they discovered the arcane texts known as the Nether Scrolls in the ruins of Erivandar, and subsequently abandoned the practices of the Erlani in order to procure even greater magical power. Netheril grew to become an invincible nation of magic and wonders, including flying cities, dominating much of the north for 3,000 years. Then the power-mad Netherese arcanist, Karsus, attempted to usurp the role of the goddess of magic. The resulting disruption in the fabric of magic sent Netheril's floating cities crashing to the ground, destroying a host of other wards and enchantments, and brought about the end of the Great Empire. Age of Humanity, negative 3,000 DR to 1,000 DR. Realms ruled by humans, including the Molarond, Narfel, and Raumathar empires, spread across and dominate Faerun. 1,500 years ago, the human settlers of the Dalelands and the elves of Cormenthor pledged their allegiance in an agreement known as the Dales Compact. A monument called the Standing Stones was erected to mark the occasion, and the advent of Dale reckoning was decreed, beginning with the year 1 DR. This method of numbering the years in Toral's history has spread across Faerun and is commonly understood, if not universally accepted. The city of Neverwinter, called Aegerstor when it was a mere settlement, was founded in 87 DR. In 882 DR, a village and trading post on the shore of a deep bay in the shadow of a great mountain was named Nimoar's Hold, after the Uthgard chieftain who claimed the area and fortified it. The place became known to sea captains as Waterdeep, a name that displaced the original within a few generations. In 1032 DR, Agarion, heir to the arts of Netheril, saved the city from itself by unseating Waterdeep's warlord and would-be emperor Raulor. Agarion declared that wisdom, not strength of arms, would rule in the city from now on, and created the Lords of Waterdeep. These and other nations and great city-states rose to prominence along the Sword Coast, forming a chain along the tradeway from Illusk in the far north to Baldur's Gate in the south near the borders of Om. Like their elven and dwarven predecessors, they fought off attacks by savage humanoids, including orc hordes from the spine of the World Mountains. Waterdeep, guided by its mysterious lords, became a rising power while old Illusk fell to the orcs for decades, until it was eventually reclaimed and the city of Luskan built upon its ruins. The present age begins at 1000 DR. The 4.5 centuries since the establishment of the Lords of Waterdeep have been tumultuous times for the Sword Coast and the world. Throughout this period, civilization struggles against the savage forces of chaos, and life attempts to persevere against the agents of death and strife, sometimes in places where even the gods themselves have not been exempt from destruction. The last 150 years have comprised one of the most cataclysmic periods in Faerun's history. On no fewer than 3 occasions, Toril has been shaken to its core by forces that have repeatedly rewritten the laws of history. The Time of Troubles. In 1358 DR, the gods were cast out of their otherworldly domain and made to wander the land incarnated as mortals. In seeking to recover their divinity, they warred among themselves. Magic became unpredictable, and the prayers of the faithful went unanswered. Some of the gods turned mortal were slain, while a handful of mortals ascended to godhood, assuming the responsibilities of the dead deities. The return of Netheril. In 1374 DR, the Empire of Netheril rose again when the floating city of Thultanthar, commonly known as Shade, returned from a nearly 2,000-year-long excursion in the Shadowfell to hover above the Anauroch Desert. The shadow-touched nobles of the city almost immediately began hunting for ancient Netherese ruins and artifacts and preparing for a restoration for their once great empire. The Spellplague. In 1385 DR, the ascended deity Cyric, aided by Shar, murdered Mystra, the goddess of magic, in her domain of Dormerheart. This act ripped asunder the fabric of magic in the world, unleashing its raw power in a catastrophe called the Spellplague. Thousands of practitioners of the art were driven mad or killed, while the face of Faerun was reshaped by waves and veils of mystic blue fire. Entire nations were displaced or exchanged with realms from other worlds, and parts of the earth were torn free to float in the air. The Second Sundering, 1482 DR to 1489 DR. A century after the Spellplague, the lands and peoples of Faerun had become accustomed to the state of things, just in time for everything to change again. The first indication of new turmoil came in 1482 DR when Baal, the long-dead god of murder, was reborn in Baldur's Gate amid chaos and bloodshed, leaving two of the city's dukes and many of its citizens dead. The return of Baal and his apparent reclamation of the domain of murder from Cyric led some scholars and sages to believe that the rules by which all deities must abide were in flux. In 1484 DR, strange calamities began to occur throughout Faerun. Throughout this period, tales began to spread of individuals who had been touched by the gods and granted strange powers. Some of these so-called chosen were at the root of the conflicts that gripped the land. Some seemed driven by divine purpose, while others claimed to be mystified as to why they would be singled out. In 1485, in Icewind Dale, the Chosen of Auril foments war with the Ten Towns and was defeated. As if to offset the drought in the south, in the autumn of 1485, the great rain began to fall around the Sea of Fallen Stars and continued unceasingly. In 1486, the elves of Myth-Drannor came to the aid of Dale lands and helped push back Sembian forces. Late in 1486, the great rain finally abated, but this event didn't signify an end to the chaos. The Sea of Fallen Stars had grown, submerging great swaths of land beneath its waves. By 1489, many of the wars that began during the Sundering had ground to a close. Other conflicts arose, and mighty threats still imperiled the world, but the deities ceased interfering with the world through their chosen. The gods were no longer silent, but quiet, and in many places new priesthoods arose to interpret the gods' now subtle signs. The present, 1501 DR. The current year is the year of the Shining Mythal. An adventurer willing to risk their life on behalf of a complete stranger deserves applause and a reward, and many are envious that adventurers live their lives on their own terms, untrammeled by custom or convention. But adventurers are also dangerous, possessing skills and magic beyond the reach of Faerun's common folk. Their lives are violent, and where they go, chaos follows. Many adventuring parties have descended into an ancient crypt only to unwittingly release a horrifying evil on an unsuspecting world. And a successful adventurer amasses wealth and power very quickly, perhaps too quickly for rulers to monitor or for the law to handle. Regardless, authority figures often turn to adventurers to solve unusual problems. Towns and cities typically have a budget set aside for hiring adventurers. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope it helps you have more fun and lean into roleplay as you play D&D. And remember, when you play D&D with your friends, be cool with each other. It's a game. It's for fun.